Are you concerned about the growing influence of political extremism, hyperpolarization, and misinformation? Well, you're not alone. This is the American Values Coalition podcast, where we explore the root causes of these societal ills and provide you with strategies to counter them.
I wonder if this Epstein thing could be a bit of a turning point. Could this be a moment where his own coalition fractures, where the rest of the country says, I don't know, what's all this about?
My guest today is Bill Kristol, who is editor-at-large of The Bulwark. He's also director of Defending Democracy Together. Previously, he was the founder of The Weekly Standard and chief of staff to Vice President Dan Quayle during the George H.W. Bush administration. He's also the co-author of The Bulwark's morning newsletter, along with Andrew Egger. Bill Kristol, welcome to the AVC podcast.
Hey, great to be with you. How are you? Everything okay? Country's in great shape, right, Nat?
Yeah, we're hanging in there. Yeah, and there's other parts of your bio that I did not mention, but one thing to clarify that is not in your bio is that you are not Billy Kristol, the actor and comedian. These are two different people for anyone listening and confused about that.
As 100,000 people click off their turn off this podcast under they signed it, they clicked on under misapprehension. But I actually know Billy Kristol slightly. Very nice guy and very talented actor, obviously.
Yeah, y'all did like a ad together or something, didn't you?
We did. It was kind of funny in 2020. Didn't seem to have moved many votes, so they were just amused by the coincidence of our names being very similar as we were.
Yeah. So this will probably be like a wide-ranging interview, but and this is I'm talking to you on Thursday, July 17th. We'll probably publish on Sunday or Monday, just to be aware, because this news is changing quickly, it seems like these days. And so the first thing I want to talk about is Jeffrey Epstein. So Epstein is, one of these stories. Like 2 or 3 years ago, I was really interested, did a lot of reading. I think I watched like 2 or 3 documentaries on Epstein. And so I was really interested then, and then I kind of moved on. That was like, okay, that was an interesting story, and kind of moved on to other things. But now, thanks to our Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and Donald Trump, who continues to say, stop talking about Epstein, over and over again, even in interviews where he's not asked about Epstein, he brings up Epstein to tell us to stop talking about Epstein, which now has got me especially curious in Epstein. But, there's so much other things going on in this world. Like, for someone who only follows the news a little bit, why is this important? What does the average person need to know about this Epstein story?
I never followed it that much. I remember thinking in 2008, that's a pretty light sentence he got. Turns out it really was a sweetheart deal that he was able to bargain with the Bush administration for. Julie Brown, who you may know, the Miami Herald reporter, did fantastic reporting in 2018 to really bring that to light and to bring to light how the magnitude of the crime. And talked with a lot of names and faces on a lot of the victims with their consent, obviously. And so then Epstein got reindicted. Dies in jail in 2019 before going to trial, presumably by suicide. Then his partner in this, Maxwell, is indicted and convicted in 2021 under the Biden administration. She's appealing. And that's probably when you decided, okay, it was a terrible, terrible crime, really disgraceful, kind of disgraceful complicity in it, I would say, by an awful lot of American billionaires, British royal family members, and so forth. And that seems like maybe more of them should have been punished a little bit, or other people who facilitated the crime, or people who provided money exchanges. I mean, there's a lot. Seems like for 2 people to get convicted of a conspiracy on this scale is a little weird. But as you say, it seemed like it was kind of over. And, what are we going to do? The Biden administration didn't really turn the rock over. They didn't say, let's go indict another 20 people for this. But the people who remained fascinated by it was MAGA world, Trump supporters. It was a conspiracy. It was they to their credit, they sort of sensed there was something wrong with this particular case. They folded it into a bunch of insane conspiracy theories, particularly QAnon. I mean, Epstein was a pretty important part of the whole QAnon thing, which is a very important, this, but I mean underrated part, I would say, of the Trump of what the Trump base believes. So Trump talked about it some, but certainly Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and many other people in MAGA world, including J.D. Vance after he was the VP nominee, talked about it. Trump said he would take a fresh look. He allegedly ordered Bondi and Patel to do so. Bondi, couldn't help but sort of parade around in February of 2025. Apparently, couldn't help boasting about how they were looking at it. The files were on her desk. They had a fake event at the White House where she gave away these binders with just the first installment. She couldn't resist the grandstanding. Maybe Trump hadn't told her yet that he did not want anything to come out. And so it's sort of, but you did this as Attorney General of the United States, incidentally. People say, well, what are you being distracted by Epstein? In any other world, if the Attorney General of the United States said the kinds of things she said, and then 3 or 4 months later said, yep, nothing there, nothing to see, there would be hearings in Congress. There would be outrage because it's like, really, what's going on? So it's a legitimate thing to be outraged about in many levels, and back to the original crimes, of course, especially. But then this sort of weird back and forth. And then Trump made it worse after Bondi and Patel put out this statement about 10 days ago. Was it Sunday? Yeah, 10 days ago. Nothing to see here. We're not releasing anything. They didn't explain anything. It just sort of, none of it's appropriate. No need to do anything. No one else should be indicted or whatever. Trump couldn't resist talking about it on Tuesday. Already just 2 days later, remember at that cabinet meeting, he sort of butted into a question directed at Bondi. Said, no, nothing to see here. I can't believe people are still talking about this. And that just got people, as you sort of suggested, more interested. He stayed on that routine. And then I thought was it yesterday or the day before that he said he called it the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. And I think that was a big mistake on Trump's part and a big moment. What's the hoax? The crimes are very real and very serious. The hoax was either that there never was a real conspiracy, in which case Trump and his allies misled an awful lot of their supporters over many years, all the way back to 2016, but especially in the last 2, 3, 4 years, took advantage of them. Those people feel like they were duped. They were suckers. I mean, and it makes them wonder, I think, this is the real political danger to Trump, part of it. I mean, well, if that's a hoax and he took advantage of our suspicions to kind of play on them, maybe the claim that the 2020 election was rigged is a hoax. And maybe a lot of other things that Trump says are a hoax. I mean, it really hurts his credibility. Or some of his supporters might think it's not a hoax. I mean, it was real, but Trump somehow got, bludgeoned by the deep state, pressured by the deep state to be part of the conspiracy, part of the cover-up, which isn't good either. So Trump has put himself in a weird position, not so much vis-a-vis the rest of us, honestly, who never cared for him, don't believe in the MAGA conspiracies. We have our opinions about the Epstein case, but just, in a certain way, that's we didn't need Epstein to tell us Trump was a bad president. But I think among his supporters, this does more damage than some of the traditional type issues, which line up along more traditional Democratic Republican lines.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned QAnon. For regular listeners of this podcast, we did a podcast with Will Sommer, your fellow Bulwark author, a couple weeks ago about QAnon. So check that out if you're interested. And so we are going to be talking about sort of the political angles of this, but I just want to clarify, as we're talking about the politics of it, this in no way minimizes our concern about what the victims went through and our concern about the justice for those victims as well.
Totally. And I really think, I'm glad you mentioned that. I want to just emphasize that and say one of the most appalling things about Trump's behavior over the last 10 days is it doesn't even occur to him to say a word about the victims. Let's think about it for a minute. If you were in some public forum and someone asked you and asked again, and you'd been making a big deal, but you'd say, well, let me first say how terrible it is, what happened, what Epstein did, and what others did, thanks to his running this sexual trafficking ring for underage girls and the abuse and coercion that was part of that. And, this is just awful. I mean, and we really have sympathy, and that's the first thing we think about. Then you'd go to the more political thing. If you were president of the United States or a senior official, I think, Trump doesn't even, it's very revealing to me that it doesn't even occur to Trump that he might say that. Now, other politicians might say it in a slightly insincere way, the way people sort of express, sorrow about things, whatever. But they would understand that that's the right thing to say. And I think some would sincerely feel that way, incidentally. And Mike Pence was interviewed, I think this morning or last night. I just heard it this morning. And I think he clearly was, moved. I mean, he said this is just horrible. terrible things Epstein did. And I think he genuinely believes that and said it. Trump doesn't even occur to Trump to say that. Trump thinks of it as a friend of Epstein. And he puts himself in Epstein's shoes a little bit, or he thinks of what's the danger to me? Am I in these files? He probably is somewhat. He was close to Epstein, plenty of evidence of them partying together and so forth. Doesn't mean he did anything criminal. Doesn't mean he knew what Epstein was up to. Though he says in 2002 that Epstein has likes women on the younger side, so maybe he had a hint. But anyway, whatever the truth of that, it doesn't. Trump thinks of it from Epstein's point of view, not from the victim's point of view. And I think it's a real window into Trump's soul, if that's the right word.
So I mean, at ABC, we've been warning so much about conspiratorial thinking and the dangers of conspiratorial thinking. And this is just so prime for that. It's prime for me to fall into like the conspiracy theories. Like, how do we protect ourselves? Like, how do we separate? Like, we don't want to fall into the conspiratorial thinking, but what separating that from the legitimate issues and questions here?
That's a very good point. And look, I mean, sometimes, conspiracy mongers can make a giant conspiracy or a false conspiracy that's just out of a germ of something, which really is a problem, right? I mean, and this is, I think, one such case. But I think the way to do it is to say, look, we know a certain amount about what happened. We have indictments, and we have, in the case of both Epstein and Maxwell, we have a trial record for Maxwell. It's not like this is a total mystery. And people need to read that. Read those indictments. And then read also some other sworn test statements from 2016 and others where people claim Trump was involved, some of the victims. This was never went to trial. We don't therefore know, it was challenged under cross-examination. But they were sworn affidavits. But just leave it at the indictments and the one of which led to conviction in the case of Maxwell. Epstein never went to trial. That's the Justice Department of the United States, serious people putting together stuff that they believe they can defend in court, that the FBI has investigated and so forth. That's pretty horrifying. And then asking for the files to come out, that's kind of a shorthand. Obviously, you can't release tens of thousands of unredacted pages in which anyone could get mentioned in any context. And a lot of people are saying false things or making things up or remembering things vaguely from 10 or 20 years before. And it's not fair to people to mention. But so all that's stipulated. You'd have to go through and figure out how you could release some material, what you could release. But our position isn't let's invent a new conspiracy. Our position is let's see as much as we can of the facts, of the files. These aren't files of made up in Steve Bannon's basement. These are actual criminal investigatory files. Now, some of them, as I say, aren't appropriate for us to see, but probably some of them are, or at least summaries of them or whatever. And so, again, I think the position that one should take is we want the facts on this, and we think there are some facts that probably should still come out. And anyway, we want the administration also to explain why it changed course so radically between Pam Bondi in February and the statement 10 days ago, and Trump now saying that's just ridiculous. There's nothing to it at all. So I think those are ways to address it that don't make us conspiracy mongers. But I thought about it. It is a funny situation. Not funny, but it's a slightly weird situation. And one has to denounce the conspiracy mongering has done huge damage to the country, obviously. And that really needs to. Now, maybe this could break it a little bit, incidentally. Maybe if people feel like Trump took advantage of them on this, and it was not, not what they said it was. He seemed not to want to go ahead and look into it. Maybe there's something similar on some of these other conspiracies. So I don't know. I have a slight kind of weird hope that maybe this breaks the fever a little bit.
Yeah. So there are files that are heavily redacted. Of course, the names of the victims should be redacted, and so it's legitimate to ask, do they need to be that heavily redacted? Is there information that should be public? These are all legitimate questions we should.
Right.
So it is curious that this is the thing that seems to divide MAGA more than anything. I mean, with so much going on, if you look at the immigration raids, the police state, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when conservatives opposed the police state, and it's just crazy how much they're supporting now with regard to the immigration raids and everything else that's going on, Ukraine and so forth. It's Epstein, the one is the thing that's really got them, on their heels.
Yeah, I think some of this other stuff could get them on their heels. It should, as you say. I wish there's much more of a pushback even to the mass deportation efforts and what ICE is doing and a lot of other issues. But on those, that's let's say a political fight, a policy fight, an implementation fight even. I think the immigration stuff's really pretty horrible what they're doing. But even so, for some reason, 30-40% of the country supports it. I think why this is politically damaging to Trump. So this is different now from it's not as important an issue, God knows, as the treatment of millions of immigrants living here, or the treatment of the fate of Ukraine, or Medicaid and so forth. A lot of other issues, but how the Justice Department operates for the next 3.5 years. But from a political point of view, things that hurt your own, that make some of your own supporters question you, obviously is more important in a way than things that just reinforce the hostility of people who already aren't for you, And Trump's pretty good, and MAGA world is pretty good, and the Republican Party is pretty good at neutralizing some of these other issues. So they become 50-50, maybe they're 60-40, against Trump, but they're not overwhelming. This is dangerous for Trump because you really could have serious erosion, serious questioning, almost a crisis in some ways, among some of his most fervent supporters. Do they become liberal Democrats? Certainly not. Do they stay home maybe in 2026? Or do they put pressure on Republican members of Congress to ask for more information about this? Maybe. And then a lot of people are not really in the MAGA conspiracy world. They heard about it a little bit. They now learn about the Epstein situation. They should be outraged about it. And they would say, well, I mean, you control the Justice Department, you control the FBI, you got plenty of people who can do the redacting that we were talking about. Let's find out what happened here. This is not unimportant, this massive sex trafficking ring and underage girls. And so I think that's why politically this is trickier for Trump than a more standard, let's say conservative liberal type fight.
We did get some good news this week that PEPFAR is going to be funded, it seems like. Any idea how that happened or why the Republicans kind of switched on that?
I mean, it's unbelievable that it was on the chopping block in the first place. It's an initiative of the George W. Bush administration. I think total bipartisan support, total bipartisan evaluation studies that show it's saved a lot of lives and continues to save a lot of lives, a small amount of money, honestly, on the part of the U.S. government. And they wanted to cut that. I remember 3 months ago when they had some initial attempts to cut it, sort of think, why aren't people fighting back against this war? Republicans, people who worked with Bush, and some did, to be fair. And Bush did some stuff behind the scenes, I think. And finally, the Republicans were able to at least save the PEPFAR money. So that's good. It is an indication that all the people who say, well, you can't stand up to Trump, no one could ever change anything, that's not true. And it does make me think that, maybe a lot more people need to get involved in defending other important priorities and programs.
Yeah, and we also some other good news. It seems that Trump has now flipped on Putin and Ukraine, maybe, or at least it will help Ukraine in some ways.
At least for now. So it's better than not. I wouldn't overdo it. I don't have great confidence. But again, very good instance where Republicans, to their credit, have hung in there on Ukraine. A lot of them, half of them voted for the aid to Ukraine a year ago, even though Trump was skeptical, I think it's fair to say. I don't have great confidence in Trump hanging in there. We'll see exactly what kind of aid they get and so forth. But at least he's moved some, which again tells me that, and some Republicans will say, well, this shows you can work the inside game. You don't have to scream and yell at Trump. You can just work within the administration and work with Keith Kellogg and with other people and, put pressure on through friendly people in the Defense Department or something. And that's all fine, sadly, if one's a Republican member of Congress, do that. I think some of us on the outside also played a certain role by just saying over and over, this is just an outrage to let Putin continue the slaughter in Ukraine and not provide the Ukrainians with weapons to defend themselves, as Putin, having strung Trump along, intensifies the massive assault on Ukraine, including on Ukrainian cities and Ukrainian civilians. So we'll see what happens. But again, both of these things tell me that Trump's very strong. He's had a very good, from his point of view, 6 months, very successful 6 months. I think you've got to say, I don't like it. But, a lot of his initiatives have gone further than I would have expected they could have, ranging from the big legislation to just a lot of things he's doing administratively through the executive branch. And his degree of control is greater than I would have expected. So all that's bad. But it turns out he's not immovable. He's not, on some issues you can challenge him. And I hope this emboldens more people to say, wait a second, on this issue too, he's doing something wrong.
Yeah, and he is. I mean, he's very mercurial. I mean, he's been on every side of every issue. So to see him flip isn't unheard of either.
Right.
Uh, so I wonder if was it the inside game, or is it just Trump being sort of like you know
I know people who did work on Ukraine, especially who did really try to work on the administration, and I give them credit. They were different positions than I am, and they're whatever they were. Some retired senior officers, some people who former senior positions in Republican administrations, including the first Trump administration. And so that's fine. I do think it's important on some of these issues to also say publicly what's going on, because you can't just sustain it with a kind of inside effort. And it's important that the public understands what's at stake here. So yeah, but I think there was some pushing and pulling and maneuvering. By inside, I don't really mean inside the administration. I mean friends of the administration. I think were able to
hmm.
persuade some people inside that it was a good idea from Trump's point of view to move on this a little bit.
So let's just talk a little bit more broadly about the state of the pro-democracy movement. Uh, I know. So we formed ABC in 2021, and I think one of the things that really helped me think about the need for an organization like American Values Coalition is you had written an article in 2016 about the new centrism, which I referred back to and read again and that sort of thing. You co-authored it actually with Bill.
Costin, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so yeah, and so what you talked about there is this sort of pro-democracy, new centrism, left and right, folks on both the left and the right who want to work together to help renew, strengthen, rebuild our democracy. And you sort of followed through with that. We know with the Bulwark, Defending Democracy Together, and there's so many other organizations in this network. How do you see our work today and where we are in the pro-democracy space?
I mean, one can't avoid the fundamental fact the challenge that we face, which is that Trump got elected once. It was bad, but it could happen. It happens. Slightly flukish. Republican primary among many candidates. Hillary Clinton, a weak Democrat, against him. He loses the popular vote, but wins the Electoral College. Governs for 4 years. Constrained in many ways by people within his own administration. Kind of some of the guardrails held, you might say. Then there's January 6th, really bad, but doesn't succeed. For a minute, it seems like even Republicans are going to condemn Trump. Some of them still condemn him. They just won't vote to actually impeach or convict him. But still, that was one moment. I think if we had this, I did have these conversations in early 2021, and it was reasonable to hope that we could get things back on track. Obviously, you can't go turn the clock back, but that maybe both parties could have a healthy pro-democracy element. I think when Trump, what Trump's been able to do over the last 3 or 4 years, though, dominating the Republican Party, winning the primary easily, winning the general election, so becoming Republicans holding Congress, makes and then taking over, filling the administration with unqualified loyalists who would not be in any way guardrails or speed bumps even for his agenda. Quite the contrary. Some of them are accelerants, Stephen Miller and some of these guys. And then having 4 or 5 months where the Republican Congress just goes along with him on everything, that's bad. So I think in terms of the country as a whole, I think we're in worse shape. I mean, I'll just be totally honest, than we were 6 months ago or than we were 4 years ago or 8 years ago or whatever, 10 years ago, whatever that was. How long was it since Trump became president? 8.5 years ago. But now there is on the other hand, I think there is a pretty strong network of pro-democracy organizations, pretty bipartisan. I've found very little resistance, honestly, from Democrats whom I've, argued with and competed against for 30 years in Washington prior to Trump, to, working with us at the Bulwark and at Defending Democracy Together, and vice versa. And honestly, at this point, I almost feel like we don't even know what our backgrounds are. You know what I mean? We're all in this fight. We've been in this fight long enough that I don't know that people think of me and think, oh my God. Some people do, of course, Republican and, Bush quail and all this stuff, Reagan person. And then I look at some people, I think, oh my God, whatever. But mostly it's been long enough now that I think there is a genuine pro-democracy movement. I think there's some very good people in it and some fresh thinking that's beginning to come out of it. But it's a challenge. I mean, we have a president who knows what he wants to do, who's an effective demagogue, who's got his administration full of loyalists, a totally cowed and intimidated Republican Congress. That's really a huge part of the problem, of course. Compliant conservative media, social media situation where there's, as we were saying earlier, conspiracism and pretty easy for them to demonize opponents, and they certainly don't hesitate to do that. Kind of demagoguery on immigrants and other such issues. It's not. So that's good. That's not good. We shouldn't kid ourselves. I think we're fighting, as well as we can. I hope, and I think there's some optimism in terms of our ability to strengthen our side of things. But unfortunately, Trump's had a strong first 6 months.
Yeah, and to be fair, I am on Blue Sky a lot, which tends to be more lefty dominated, and I do see a lot of folks often saying, "I can't believe I'm agreeing with Bill Kristol."
Yeah, right. There you go. I don't know. I should say that. I should say the opposite more often. I don't even bother. Honestly, it's like and people should be. Honestly, I think I have a slightly different perspective on this. Not to go, who cares about agreeing with Bill Kristol or not, but I started off as a kind of Cold War liberal Democrat. I was a Hubert Humphrey fan when I was in high school. I did a tiny bit of volunteering in that campaign in '68. I was volunteering for Scoop Jackson when he ran for president, the Cold War liberal. In '72, human rights, Cold War liberal, really a admirable man. '76, I actually worked for Moynihan for the summer in his New York Senate primary. Then I basically switched over, and by '80, I was for Reagan. But it made me, I think personally, I'm a little less astonished that you could be on one side and then the other, and it was just different in the '70s and '80s. Plenty of people went the path I went. Plenty of people went the opposite path, incidentally. Leon Panetta started off as a young Republican and ended up as, Bill Clinton's chief of staff and then Barack Obama's defense secretary and so forth. So I think that our generation is a little less amazed that, yes, how could you be on the same side? But, it's a lot, many years have passed since some of those fights we had. And I really think it's important in a way, not to forget about the past at all, because it's important and there are lessons to be learned, but to really focus on this moment. Really, my impression in Britain in the 1940, 41, 42, they had a unity government. And God knows Churchill had been a pretty fierce conservative on some issues, a real Tory, and the labor people did not like him and hadn't liked him for 30 years. And there they were, governing together and putting off, certain discussions about certain issues till after the war. We're not quite in that situation, I grant. But I feel like we need a little more of that attitude. And I think we are. I don't know what you find in your work, but I feel like people are there's not too much internal sniping really on the pro-democracy side. Do you think?
Yeah, we focus on the things we agree on for now, and then we're like, okay, we'll save the battles for when we're able to save democracy so that we can have these fights in the future, right?
And I feel like some people, I say this about myself at least, I've also learned some things, and I don't quite have all the same views I had 20 years ago. Most people don't. It's like you do change your mind about some things as you get older, and the situations change. So I think there's been a fair amount of that too, and I think that's allowed people to say, look, whatever 20 years ago you believed A, B, and C, I believe D, E, and F, but we're just in a different world, and I have no problem with litigating some of those issues still, but let's talk about the actual thing. Ukraine, I've been very struck, for example, something you've been very concerned about too. I really, liberal Democrats, Reagan Republicans like me, we were really pretty much in total accord on that, I think.
Yeah. I think, and I do see some hopefulness when I see the success and the growth of the Bulwark, and just the fact that there is a growing and large audience for this pro-democracy message, but from a conservative perspective. To me, that's a hopeful sign.
Yeah, I think we've done well, and thanks mostly to Sarah and Longwell and Jonathan Last and a lot of other people, Tim Miller. But others have done well too in that kind of centrist space, and so at least on a certain, that's not mass public necessarily, but the Dispatch and many other groups, you guys. I think there's a network now. Whether it can be manifested in our politics, given the two-party system, whether it can really penetrate into the grassroots, whether some of our institutions can be fixed that have gotten pretty broken at the local and state level. That's a real tough task, but that's really what we have to do.
Yeah, and I would just remind people of the priority here. Like whatever you care about, whatever issue is your top priority, whether it's Ukraine or abortion or the economy or healthcare, none of it will matter if we don't have a democracy. Your opinion will no longer matter at that point if we no longer have a democracy. So that needs to be something we come together on to defend.
No, it's great that you do that. And look, I think I would also make not only wouldn't your opinion matter, but actually living in a free country is kind of an important value in its own right. It's not just that this is an instrumental thing for the sake of, advancing other issues, right? I mean, it's kind of a good thing to be a free person in a free country. So that's important.
Right. Even when you're on the losing side of an election, it's still better to live in the democracy.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, Bill Kristol, thank you so much for joining us. Any last words you'd like to share with our audience?
No, thanks, Nap. Keep up the good work. And I wonder if this Epstein thing could be a bit of a turning point. People might look back and say, politics is full of weird turning points and inflection points and things no one expected to be a moment. And it might be that Trump, who, has had a very strong first 6 months, very aggressive, much more successful than I would like, he was losing some public support. Could this be a moment where his own coalition fractures, where the rest of the country says, I don't know, what's all this about? He can't stop talking about this thing that he says we shouldn't be talking about, as you said at the beginning. Maybe this is a moment where historians will look back and say that Trump started his second term very aggressively and apparently with real success, but hit a real roadblock here. And it wasn't the one we all expected exactly, but I think it makes it more likely now that other things can come into play. So,
all right. Bill Kristol, thank you so much for joining the ABC podcast.
My pleasure.